What's good, everybody? It's me, Rishi, a One Piece player since OP1, in fact, and I've had one top 16 and a thousand player tournament, four top 64s, and other tournaments, and I've gotten two nationals and whites, and I've come from pretty much no experience in card games and only had roughly 2 years in One Piece. Been playing since OP2, and I want to share everything that I've learned and the fundamentals that I feel like are necessary to top and win games. So why am I making this guide? This guide is for beginner players that struggle in the game, struggle to win, and where I was as a player almost 2 years ago when I couldn't top and was getting top 128s left and right. This video is going to show you how to change the way you think about the game, change the way you adapt to the meta, and this video is going to be timeless, not just dependent on the meta. It's always going to be working in whatever meta, because these are just the strategies I learned and exactly what I did. So why do fundamentals matter? Well, many players think that they just need the best deck to win, but they don't even know how to play the best deck properly. Tournaments are full of players who don't study the game but expect to win. And what does study the game mean? It means legit just knowing what the other person's cards do, what they're curving out to do, and what their win condition is. And these are all things we're going to talk about in this video that, once you understand, are going to help you really take your gameplay to the next level, because without understanding win condition, you're never going to understand a strategy or meta or most effective tactic available to face other decks in the meta, because you need to understand what your opponent's doing to understand what you should do. And like I said, who's this guide for? I used to be someone that would literally never even win a local. I would go X3 or X2. I was not very good at the game. But with resources available to you and me, I was able to go to from winner at a local to winning a store champ to getting a top 16 card. So I think all of y'all can do the same. And this guide is for you to take the first stepping stone. It's not for super advanced players looking to make that push to top 16. Maybe get their first top 64 card. This is for them. But this is more for people that have never topped before. Who's this? And yeah, like I said, who's this guy for? I just said it before. But anyway, let's talk about what we're going to go over in this guide. In this first video, we're going to talk about deck identity and win conditions, and also dawn management and the basics of it, basically curving and resource management. And then the next video, we're going to talk about resource management, matchup knowledge, and then in the last video, we're going to talk about life management and reading in the enemy's hand. So let's go ahead and get started. Every deck has a purpose, So when I see players that don't know what they're doing, is they don't know how their deck plays out, and they don't know what they should be doing. And once you know how your deck is supposed to be playing, you can really play your deck's identity. For example, is your deck a deck that likes to rush them down like Shanks? Is your deck an aggro deck that like Dofi? Or does it like to do both? So like Dofi and Shanks can both do both. Or is it a control the board deck like BY Luffy and Rob Lucci, which BY Luffy is like substantially a little bit more aggro than Rob Lucci, but you get what I'm saying. They both play geckos that remove stuff, okay? But I mean, obviously Rob Lucci is a little bit stronger in the control range. But once you know your deck's identity, for example, like Katakuri, that would, like, right over here, this Katakuri, like, Katakuri's, like, it has top end, and it's trying to, like, lethal the enemy down by making them lose life. So I would say Katakuri's a pretty aggressive deck. Yeah? Like, knowing what decks do that are in the meta is, like, step one to winning more games. because you just need to understand your win condition and play to your win condition, and play to disrupt the opponent's win condition, right? So every deck has purpose. So for example, like Shanks would be like, game plan is I'm trying to ramp up to get to 10. I'm trying to get to 10 Dawn. I'm just trying to curve out and play big bodies and hit them. I'm not really trying to focus on their board, but I mean, because I'm pretty tanky. I have a -1K, you know. I'm just trying to kill them. But Ralucci, on the other hand, is like, I need to get rid of every single threat. That would be the purpose. And then we're gonna talk about the mistakes that I think that beginners make, are they play their decks without a strategy, are knowing the best curve. They don't even know how their deck is supposed to ideally curve out. And I mean, that can just be found through resources. There's tons of guides on decks you play, and you should read decks that other people play and play other, like, mess around with other curves too, so you know how to play into those decks. Maybe if you're a Shanks player, you mess around with Rob Lucci just so you know how to play into Rob Lucci better, right? So playing, and then the next thing is playing someone else's list without understanding the core of the deck. Whenever I've understood a deck in One Piece, I first understood it at its base. Then we talked about tech. But it really comes down to understanding the deck's identity. So what's your win con? A win condition is a strategy your deck needs to perform to win, generally following a curve that is optimal. So, for example, Shanks would be, my win condition is to hit the face, ignore board, and lethal them down before they can respawn. Rob Lucci would be, clear the board and starve them out. And BY would be, keep their board in check until I can use my leader ability. And these are all kind of correct for our list. So this would be like more than just identity, which we did over here. This would be a lot more advanced into win condition. This is your win condition. And this really, if you can't describe your deck in one sentence, you don't understand the win condition. And what is your deck's win condition? You have to ask your questions. Does my deck play a lot of removal? Well, clearing my board is probably my win condition. Does my deck have a lot of early game aggressive cards? Then my deck is probably to swarm and aggro them down. Asking questions like these can help, develop awareness of this first fundamental piece, and which is just understanding decks' identities in the meta. And now that we understand this, what's next? We're going to talk about curving and how curving wins games. Your curve is generally what units in order of dawn turns will be played. Executing your optimal curve is how to execute your win condition. Bad curves lead to awkward turns and inefficient dawn usage, and then different decks curve differently. So, for example, aggro decks may use a lot of their dawn for swinging. Mid-range decks may use swinging while establishing board, like Dofi. And the quickest way to get better is memorize your deck's general optimal curve. Now, what is that? We're going to go through some example curves just so you can find out. But the best way to find your curve is find someone that's really good at your deck. Look at resources, and I will do my best to present videos on almost all the meta decks I can with the optimal curves. And you can check out some of these videos. Like I, for example, have a Purple Luffy video for this set and Rob Lucci video. But finding your optimal curve would be looking for like a resource or a guide where they would probably talk about the optimal curve for the deck you're playing. And the curve can vary from matchup to matchup, but there's always like an ideal curve that's like usually kind of straightforward in most matchups. And as you can see in this matchup, we have the Shanks curve, and it's just Uta on 1 Dawn, and we're going to skip 3 Dawn because you just do nothing there. And then 5 Dawn into Ace, 7 Dawn into Beckman, and 8 Dawn into Rayleigh, and then 10 Dawn into Shanks. Just knowing this game plan off the back of your memory, like just memorizing Shanks' game plan, not only will help you play Shanks if you're just trying to learn how to play Shanks, but also learn how to play into it, because now I know exactly what my opponent's gonna do. I mean, it's not exact, but I have a good idea of what they could do or what the worst situation would be. That's that curve, and I can play, okay, if they're gonna play Beckman on 7, like, how am I gonna get rid of that, or how am I gonna respond to that? Like, there's just lots of questions you can ask yourself once you know the curve. And this is why, like, one of the first things I did when I was like a new player was that, like, I learned the curve of my deck and I just tried to memorize it. Like, this is like the first step. Like, I remember getting a lot of success just by memorizing my curve, and like this was like probably like a 80% boost in just playing better if I just knew my curve. And we're gonna go through another curve right here, and that's Purple Luffy's curve, and this is the first curve again. And we got, like, you can go into videos or guides by whoever makes the deck or whatever, and this guide, my Purple Luffy guide, I went over this curve, and you'll understand it more when the player explains why they curve out like this, and which will probably be in guides like this. But knowing these curves are so beneficial, and memorizing all the curves, that I, like, honestly suggest that you just, like, try to learn all the curves of the meta decks, the optimal curves, and it will just make you feel a lot more comfortable knowing what people are doing. So we got, in this one, we got Law on 1 Dawn, Zoro on 4, giving us a search and a +1. Then we got Luffy Taro for the 7 cost that plays Sangoro to draw a card, or the Sanji that can also rest a card. So, like, I know all this stuff, but do you? Like, do you know all these cards? Do you know that this is the ideal curve for Purple Luffy? It's stuff like this that makes me feel more comfortable in the Purple Luffy matchup than, say, someone else. So, like, learning these curves is like the step 1 to becoming a better player, and we're going to talk about other steps, but this is how you get better at your deck too. And then we'll talk about, this is the Raw Lucci curve. We have Lucci on Dawn 1, we got Spam Emitters Tempest Kick, Dawn 3, we got Brook, Dawn 5, we got a variation of things to respond to their board, and then some decks might have a more complex curve, and that's okay if you can't memorize everything they're gonna do. But just having a general idea of what they can do really makes your matchups easier, and we're gonna talk about that in future videos on how to respond to people's boards and the such, and like how to play around people's, like, hands, and knowing what they're gonna do, and knowing the most optimal play and the optimal curve based on matchups. But this is just like a general sense, because this information will always be available. Maybe Rob Lucci won't be meta, maybe it'll be a different deck, but curving is really important, and knowing your deck's ideal curve is probably the number 1 thing in Dawn management that's going to help you not have inefficient turns and always know, like, the best turn. And obviously there's arbitrary, like, arbitrary, like, you know, situations where, you know, this might not be the best hand, or this might not be the best play, but, you know, those situations there's not that many, right? So anyway, this is video 1 of my series on One Piece fundamentals, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more content.